Okay, so welcome everyone to today's social system mapping OnRamp session for March 14th, 2022. Really glad to have you with us. And yeah, welcome. Glad you're here. So, oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. I always forget certain things and then I'm confused. This is par for the course. This is how Christine operates. Where's my thing? Hang on. There should be a thing. Okay, we're getting there. Progress has been made. Okay, so let's start out with asking you to do some quick intros in the chat of who, your name, your pronoun, your location, so we can see who all is here. And I'm going to unshare my screen for a moment because there's nothing to look at there. It's funner to look at each other's faces while you're typing. And okay, welcome Michelle from Brooklyn. Yay. And Mary Roscoe from San Francisco Bay Area, Brian from California, and Yi from Chicago. Welcome, glad you made it, could be with us. Melanie from Birmingham. Fun. And then who did we just lose? We just lost somebody. Mercedes, Zoom issues. Oh, okay. We know she'll probably, hopefully she'll make it back. Chad from Ann Arbor. Aha, I have a sister-in-law in Ann Arbor. Okay, so thanks for that. And then next chat thing, this is to provoke a little bit of thinking about one of the main reasons we do social system mapping, to get us started thinking about that, not giving you the reasons, but what's a question that you have? I'm assuming that most people who show up for these things have a network or community of practice or some kind of community building initiative that they're part of or working on, or they probably wouldn't be here because that's the universe this sits in. And so if I'm wrong, just feel free to not answer the question or to, if this is too far from where you want to be, jump off. But so the question is, what's a question, what I'm asking for in the chat is, what's a question that you have about this network or community that you're part of, that I'm assuming you're part of and could be wrong about, that you really don't have a good way to answer. So a question that you're carrying about the community that you can't easily find an answer to. And welcome back, Mercedes. It looks like you made it this time. If you want to do a quick mic check, feel free. And I'm assuming people are thinking about a question they have. And if you really don't want to answer this, even if you just kind of don't want to answer, don't feel obliged. There's no pressure here. It's just an invitation, but also just an attempt to get our brains working. Thinking about what we don't easily know. Welcome, Mercedes. You're in California. Also, there's a lot of Californians here today. So Mary's question, how to engage others in mapping. That is absolutely a question that convincing people who are within their own containers looking at the world as a series of containers, what connections is like from within network horizons? What connections like? Interesting. Yeah, Chad, that's a good one. How to maintain and learn from engagement after the initial go. I feel like that's a very up, for me, that's very up these days. Very big question. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the presentation, and I'm going to keep my eye out. How will people contribute to making the map use it? How can we make it? Yes. Very good questions. I'm gonna share my screen again and move forward, and I'll keep my eye on the chat and see if there are places where we will be able to address any of these questions. But we won't be able to finally answer them because that's not how any of this works, obviously, but we can explore them a little further maybe. Okay, so I'm trying to go back to sharing my, okay, so your hosts today are me and Kara Martner. I'm the co-founder of SumMap and Greater Than the Sum, and sort of founder of social system mapping methodology and the main tool, one of the main tools, SumMap. Kara Martner is my sort of partner in all things I do and producer here in today's context. And just for those of you who are new to this context, what this is, I want to just give you an idea of what we're doing here so that you can decide if this is relevant for you or not. So first, this is about a vision and a possibility. So there's this kind of mapping that we refer to frequently, which we call social system mapping. And we believe that this kind of mapping can help communities and change networks become self-organizing more quickly and wisely, and can catalyze greater potential in all kinds of collective transformation initiatives. So at the highest level, this is about leaning into that possibility and learning how to make that turn our vision into a reality. It's also an opportunity to learn about this kind of mapping, as well as to get familiar with and literate in the body of theory that supports our belief in the potential, that informs our mapping practice, and that is an essential ingredient of our map reading process. It's also an opportunity to contribute your own experience and expertise to this emerging mapping practice, because it's not just about theory. It's also about lived experience and insight into the dynamics of people working together, which I generally assume most people who show up have a lot of experience, often a lot more experience in that than I do. And so your insight is always helpful. And it's a community of practice and field building with an intent for all of us to become carriers, to not just become mappers, but also to become carriers of a culture of generative transformation, since that's what this is about. And we know that mapping is not going to be the be all and end all of transformation, and that if we don't map from the right perspective and with the right intentions, we are not going to fully become as transformational as we could. We could even do some harm, which we don't want to do. So the community practice is about becoming transformational mappers. And just lastly, social system mapping is foundational to this community, but not all of us are mappers. Some of us are here to learn about learn mapping. Some of us are here to inform the practice, others out of curiosity about what's possible, and others just because of the community itself, because we have an affinity for one another and each other's work. And some of us are just simply here be part of something interesting. So for whatever reasons, please do feel welcome and join us however it makes sense for you. So for this particular session today, which we call the OnRamp session, this session happens on the second Monday of every month. Somebody from our community will share a map that they've been working on and just share it, walk through it, and answer questions about it. Today, I'm going to share our own community of practice social system map. I know a number of you are on it. Kara will put links in the chat. If you're not on this particular social system map that I'm going to share with you, we welcome you to be on it. So she will share a link that will enable you to put yourself on the map. If you are on the map and you haven't updated your data or your connections recently, Kara will also give you a link that will enable you to get your own individual link so you can go in and update it. That's about it for now. Yeah, that's that slide. Sorry. Okay. So for today's agenda, we're going to just do welcome. We did the welcome and introductions already. I'm going to tell you what a social system map is briefly, and then we're going to walk through our community of practice map, and then we'll do some Q&A. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our format, we have the formal session will go to the top of the hour. And then those of you who need to, who only plan to come for an hour and who need to jump off, we will send you on your way with love. And then I'll stick around for an extra informal half an hour, and anybody who has just further questions, more they want to talk about, get to know, some of the core members of the community who usually hang out for the extra half hour, you can stick around for that extra half hour, but it's just open-ended. Okay, so what is a social system map? It is, I like to say, a social system map is basically a mashup of a bunch of kinds of maps: a system map, a stakeholder map, an asset map, a social network map, a concept map, and more. So there's a whole lot of information that you can overlap and combine in a social system map. And so the thing that's unique about a social system map, though, is that although there are a lot of visual similarities among most of these maps, what's different is that a social system map includes dimensions of all of these maps and more, so that it's far more layered and far more complex and dense than any one of these kinds of maps is going to be on their own. So it's also more of a process than a product. It's online, it's interactive, accessible to all network members, and it's iterative and emergent and dynamic. So it's not a single snapshot in time, but it evolves over time. A social system map will look to community members, people who are on the map and who share their data to be on the map. It will look and feel like a single interface, but there are actually two separate tools that are used for making a social system map. One of which is Kumu, which is a data visualization platform. So many of those pictures that I showed you, so Kumu, these could all have been made in Kumu, those maps. Kumu is basically a data visualization platform that shows dots and lines. So it shows entities and the relationships between entities, and you can make all of those kinds of maps in Kumu. So that's where the data, that's the tool that puts the data in the patterns and in the views that we look at in a social system map. The Sum app is the tool that my partner and I made. And this is the tool that gathers the data from the community. It was designed specifically to gather network relationship data. And make it in a way that people can easily sort and find each other. You can easily keep adding new members, keep updating the question sets, et cetera. So this is the piece that makes us able to get the data and able to keep this map iterative and evolving and relevant and alive. And so the data gets gathered in SumApp, and then SumApp has a link that goes directly into Kumu. So the data is flowing right into Kumu from SumApp live. So as I update something, it will flow right into Kumu. And then in Kumu, you can do whatever you want to make. You can make different views, different decorations, et cetera. So that takes some a certain mapping skill set, but you will visualize your data in Kumu. And then we take the embed link from Kumu and plunk it back into SumApp, so that as people are interfacing with SumApp, they can see the map, they can go back and forth between where they put their data and where they see the data without having to log into different places. So that is, hang on. I think that's, okay. I didn't mean this to be here. Oh yeah. So, and for those of you who, so this is just a piece of information. We have community practice sessions most Mondays at this time. So watch your inbox. And next week, Jim Best, who's with us this morning, is going to lead our deep dive, a deep dive about, Jim, I thought I'd offer you a moment if you want to talk about that. And I'm sorry I did not forewarn you, but I know you let me do this to you whenever I want. And you're muted. So if you're going to say what your deep dive is about next week, you should unmute.
Why don't you tell me what our deep dive is going to be next week, and then I can riff on that.
It's going to be about the adaptive action cycle, a graphic thing that you and I have been playing with, going back and forth with.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out a compelling way to visualize the way the system, social system mapping theory of change works. And so we've got an initial, getting towards an initial diagram, but would love to have your input on it. So that's what we'll do.
So we're going to talk about a diagram, and it's going to be really cool.
I love talking about diagrams, so
Even if it
hopefully
doesn't
some of
sound
you will
cool.
as well.
Might sound kind of dumb, but it's going to be cool. Okay, so I'm going to go to our social system map. How many of you, but I know a lot of you, so here's what I'm looking for, is how many of you have never seen a social system map at all? Either like raise your hand or put a hand up on the Zoom. It looks like everybody has seen one. Okay, so how many of you know how to navigate a map? Like actually, like if you see one, know what to click on and how to make it. Okay, Michelle's gone, I don't think so. Okay, so I was just wondering what to focus on, which you just told me. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay, so this is the first thing. So this is, we've gathered the data in SumApp and the data is now being visualized in Kumu. So this is the Kumu platform. And one of the first things that, I mean, one of the sort of main ways we think about social system mapping is, now that we have all this data, there's a lot of data, it can be kind of overwhelming to just throw it all on the map. How are we going to visualize it so that, and how are we going to make things like here's filters, what filters do we need to make this map, this data meaningful? And so we make different views. And so each of these, so we usually make, this is how, so Tim and I, my partner and I have a sort of design protocol that we use. We make different views showing the data from different ways, which I'm going to walk you through. But the first thing to note is that we put our views in links in the side panel. We usually, so each of these is a different view focusing on a different thing. So a different way I want to understand this network. I being any of us, different way we can each understand this network. And we put them in sequential order of getting from sort of basic and simple and like where people are likely to start and be curious into increasing in complexity, so that we don't overwhelm them right off the bat. We sort of start where they're able to sort of begin and then move through the views from there. The thing that I want to say about this particular map is that I have been practicing social system mapping for, I don't know, 5 years, something like, maybe not that long. And we had been, sort of working on this community practice for a couple of years, and we didn't have a map. So this is maybe a year and a half ago, or almost 2 years ago now. And I was like, we should have a map of our own so that A, when I run out of other people's maps to share in OnRamp sessions, we have something we can share, and B, that we can all have something to engage with so that people can see what it's like to be on a map, as well as actually we all sort of learn through the processes of engagement and keeping things going, et cetera. And so I just did what, and there didn't seem to be a lot of energy in the community to like think this through really deeply together. So I did what often happens in a network, is I just made a map. I just, used my authority because I can, and came up with the best question set I could think of and got something started. And this was meant to be sort of a beginning point and a prototype. And my hope was that we would then engage the community in refining the views, refining the questions, et cetera. And then of course I got very busy because I'm just always too busy, and didn't really, like, I kept feeling like, oh, people would give me comments. They'd say, oh, you should add this question, or that question is framed stupidly, or whatever. And I would like have them in my head and think I have to get back to that. But, and I'm telling you this for a reason, because the last 6 months, what we've been doing is, a small group of us have been actually trying to think through, how do you take a map that exists and continually give it more deeply to the community? So when I made this map, this was my lens on the community. This is what I thought was relevant and important, or this was my starting point. This is sort of one of the challenges of mapping in general, is that mapping, a map always reflects somebody's or some group of somebody's point of view. And part of the theory of social system mapping is to get that that ownership, like that point of view, to be as collective as possible and not just coming from one person, or even ideally not even from a small group of people, but you have to start with what you can start with. So anyway, so there's a handful of us, Mary and Jim are part of this process, who have been not just thinking about what are the questions. We have a whole big list of questions that people have been suggested that could go into the map, or changes that could happen in the map. But how do we make this into a process, make these ideas into opportunities for dialogue, so that we're not just taking the two of us and saying, oh yeah, let's reword this in this way and plunking it in there, but we're saying, we're actually, for the people who care about a particular way of framing things, or particular how to language a question, to hear from each other about the different perspectives and the parts of the system that each of their perspectives comes from, so that we're actually using that as an opportunity to learn more about one another and to build more like shared understanding and shared insight, rather than just sort of using it as a, an administrative task of, okay, fix this question, put it in the map, move on. So I'm saying that because as I look at this map, I'm very aware of what's missing, like what hasn't been done, what could be done. And I want to share why it hasn't been done. It's because I've spent the last 2 years refraining from making executive decisions and trying to figure out how to make it a more engaged process. And also to say that we are working on that and that changes are coming. So in the directory view, so that was a lot of me talking fast. So I'm gonna take a breath. Okay. So this is our first, so this is a view. And when I say view, I'm gonna whip through these views briefly and come back to this one just to show you, see, this looks different. There's different stuff here. This looks different. Now there's lines and there weren't on the other one. So each of these views it's all the same data set. Why is that behaving like that? It's all the same data set, but it's representing the data differently. And so when we say views, that's what we're talking about, is how can we use the combination of the data and the functional capabilities of Kumu to tell some kind of story or show some kind of detail that we can't see, or patterns that we can't see in any other way. So the first view is that we usually make is a directory view. That's usually the starting point. When people say, we want a social system map, they say, so that people can find each other. It's just about knowing who, who's interested in what, who has what skill set, who has what, who lives in the, same part of the world as I do, et cetera. So this directory view will usually just have the people in the map. There will be no connections, because connections add a level of complexity that is not helpful at first for most people. And then there will be some filters that are defined, ideally defined by the community. And I mean, the questions are defined by the community, and then the filters will be chosen by members of the community. And so we'll be able to filter on whatever it is we want to filter on. I just threw 2 simple filters on here, and I'm very aware that there are probably, let me just pick on Rebecca. So another thing to note is I'm clicking on this person, which means the side panel will change. So this side panel is openable and closable by clicking on that vertical ellipsis, or by clicking on the tab key, which I'm doing. What you've selected, like right now I've selected the background, whatever you've selected will show up in the side panel. So this is the sort of the default background for when nothing else is selected. So here I've selected a person, and all of this data has come from some app. It's been, the questions are in some app, and the person, she answered this in some app. And so I can take any question that is categorical, where there's checkboxes or drop downs or radio buttons, and turn those into drop downs. And so I think we should have more filters in this map, but we haven't gotten to that point of discussing it collectively. And so I've just been holding off. But so so often in this kind of a direct review, you'll see things like, the city you work in or live in, or, part of the world, or the expertise you have, or what you're looking for from the community, or various other kinds of filters. So this is the direct review. I'm going to pause and see if anybody has questions before I move to other views. This is very basic, but if you haven't seen one of these, I hope I'm not going too fast. Questions, comments, suggestions for speeding up, slowing down, doing something different.
That's good.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Okay, thanks, Anna. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing. And I think I didn't say this, but please just jump in with a question. If I'm talk, feel free to interrupt me and throw in a question if you have one, or when you have one. So this is the next view. This is called, often they're in a network. One of the sort of most basic things that networks try to do is to identify the skill sets that the network is wanting people within the network to have and to share with one another. And first identify the skills that are needed and relevant in the context of the network, and then list them, and then as a way to identify who has which skill, as well as who could use help with which skill. So in this context, the skill sets are listed are explicitly about social system mapping, but they could be about any kind of whatever skill sets are relevant in that context. So those are completely custom, but having asked who has which skills you have and which skills you need help with, we have a wonderful set of data that gives us what we call an offers and asks view. So in our context, so again, this is all contextual for social system mapping, the social system mapping community, but what we do with the offers and asks view is we combine those answers into a view that shows everyone who answered. So we don't have people who didn't answer one of those two questions because they're not going to be relevant in this view. And then we cluster, this is called clustering, on the responses. So I can't see this well enough to read it, but getting people to participate in the mapping project is a skill in social system mapping that we identified, and that people, I'm hovering over it, and as I hover over it, you can see everyone who responded. I gotta hold my mouse still though, and it keeps wiggling. Hang on. Okay, so as I'm hovering over it, you can see that there are a number of people have responded to that question, because actually it's an important question in this context, totally irrelevant in others, but this one, it matters. And I'm going to do a thing called focusing. When you've selected one or more nodes on the map, and you can see it's selected because it's got that big yellow border, this icon will appear. It's not there if you don't have anything selected, but then you can click on it and it will focus on everyone who's connected to that node. And so now we can see everyone, we've eliminated everyone who didn't connect to this node, getting people to participate in the mapping project. And we can see that some people have this solid line connected to it, and some people have this gray dotted line connected to it. And the solid line people, let's see if this is working the way it should. No, let's do this way. And sometimes in Kumu, it can be, you can make all these, like, let's try it this way. Everybody who's good at something, I'll get, no. Sometimes the cold, all of this, just to know, all of these things are custom designed. So whoever is your technical wizard in your project, will be doing this part. In this instance, it's my husband, Tim, is our map, our Kumu guy. So I'm doing this a different way. I'm selecting on that filter and I'm putting who offered. And now I can see everyone who says they think they're good at, oh, it's not moving. Okay. This is a fun thing about Kumu, is that it's not a fun thing, but each of these things is a little bit of code, and sometimes they cancel each other out. And so it can get kind of if then that-ish. And sometimes we put things on here that don't actually know how to work together in that way. So sometimes I say, just take that off of there because it's bugging me. But here was my point I was trying to make, is the people who have a solid green line are good at that skill, and the people who are and like saying, yeah, I can help someone learn how to do that or have a conversation about that. And the people with the dotted lines are people who say, yeah, I don't know how to do that, and I would love to know how to do that. I think that would be great. So this is one way in your community that you can both as individuals start to reach out and find people when you've got questions or you want help with something, find people who maybe can help you, as well as it's a thing that, you know, I can look at this and I can say, oh yeah, Derek was talking about, he was needing something. I can look on here and I may know somebody that I could introduce him to. So I can use it both as a network weaver and triangle closer, as well as doing my own outreach to find out who might be able to help me. And so this is usually, it's more visually complex, but it's in terms of the purpose of networks and what comes to people, like what people think of. This is sort of the next level of where people are at with their thinking about networks. And so we start with just who's here, then we do an offers and asks view to help people match up. Then our third view is often, is this the right one? Yeah, what we call the connections view or the involvement view. This is to those of us who like live and breathe this kind of stuff. This is the relevant. This is where the juice happens, is being able to see who's related to who's connected to who's collaborating with whom, to start to see the patterns in the structures of the network. But especially for new network members and for people who haven't really sunk into the whole philosophical, theoretical stuff about networks, not where you try to tell them this right away and they'll just be like, oh, that's too much. I don't care. Why would I need to know who knows who? Like, why would I care? Is a question that I get all the time. Why would I care? Like, well, that's part of our theory of change. And you know, I'm trying to help you figure out why you would care. But
Christine, I think we have a good chat question in the chat that might relate to the last view, if you just wanted to touch base on that quickly.
Yep. How do you deal with the issue that some people say they're good at many things and some people say they won't say they're good at them? And then what about people who are hesitant to ask for help? Yeah, all of those are, I'm going to go back to that view for a second. In this context, we have this very interesting dynamic, which is that a lot of people don't know what social system, they don't distinguish social system mapping from social network analysis or from system mapping. And so they will say that they're professionals, or, you know, that they're really good at a piece of it, but actually they've never even made a social system map, which is a different animal with a different set of challenges. And one of the ways I tried to get at that was to ask, well, first of all, to ask what their interests are. And Brian has pointed out to me that this was a really dumb sentence construction because you can't really see the whole of the question. So we're going to fix that. But it's a good question, Michelle, and I don't have a perfect answer. And one of the things that I've tried to ask was, you know, how invested are you? Like, is this just something you're supportive of? Is this something you've spent time and money learning? Or is this like the main component of your work? Because that is one way of asking that question. But another piece of that is from, you know, what I would say in a specific network context would be looking at like who says they're good at something, and then looking at how they structurally fit into the network. If they're kind of central and there's a lot of people have collaborated with them or said they get, you know, they've learned from them, that's gonna, you know, increase the likelihood of their that being a real reflection. And the thing about like people who won't say they're good at something, or those are places where, that's a really good question, and I've never been asked it before. in this way. And to me, that question is a piece of looking at the network structure. So if we're looking at the patterns of relationships in the network or the structure of the network, and we're seeing that there are people who we want to start to look at, like, not only who's in the core, who's in the middle, who's in the periphery, not just in terms of, oh, this is where they sit, but also in terms of the ways they're connected to the system. So if it's let's say it's a school system, and you've got school administrators, you've got educational policymakers, you've got teachers, you've got parents, you've got students, you've got all these different roles, and you start to see that, like the school staff are all on the periphery of the network, and the administrators or the teachers are all in the core. And you can start to look at what are the patterns, and start to ask yourself questions like, who might be well connected and not, or might not be well connected and maybe could be because they represent a certain perspective. So that's a complex question, and there'll be, it won't have a super direct, like, here's how we deal with that, but certainly ways of, closing triangles, looking for where the gaps are, is a big piece of why you would care about who knows who. I don't think I answered that very well. Do you want to say more, Jim? Yeah, please.
I was just thinking that there's some social norming that goes on. I think as you all look at a map together, people start to go like, oh, I didn't offer this and other people are offering this. And so I'm going to change my answers a bit to do that. That might happen as more people use the map together. But I think also you could just be more specific about the questions. You can ask questions that are more concrete, where you go like, how much of, as Christine was saying, how much of my work is really based on this, or how many times have I done this, as opposed to leaving it so open where you go like, what's one of my skills? You say, well, if you use this skill, do you use it, in 20% of your time? Do you, have you done this 5 times? So in other words, you might ask the questions more concretely that get more specific.
Yeah.
You lose some of the fluidity when you do that, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah. Often there are several different good suggestions and ways we can approach these kinds of questions. And to me, it's the beginning to ask the questions and ask them together and think about them together. That is, one of the core goals of doing this kind of mapping is it enables us to explore those things together and come up with our, the right approaches in a context. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the next view, which is, so in this community practice map, we have some app enables, we built it, we were asked for this enough times that we built it in, enables us to take, so when we first started, we were just mapping people relationships, people to people relationships. That was the point, and their relationships to the broader system. But we had a number of clients who wanted to map organizations. So this organization's relationship with that organization. So then we had to make some tweaks to the software to make it so that you could use it, that the language would suit organizations. But so then we had these, sort of two kinds of nodes. And if you think about it, sometimes people would want to map both organizations and people, which they could do if they made the survey very generic. So it didn't matter, are you talking about me? Are you talking about my organization? Or, it's just a sort of a much more generic survey. Or because if you were to try to do it specifically, it would be like people would have one kind of set of questions and organizations would have a different set of questions. There'd be some overlap, but organizations and people don't have the same demographics. And there would also be a difference in the kinds of questions that you asked, because person-to-person relationships are different they're defined differently than organization to organization relationships. And if you want to define the relationship between a person to an organization, like I might be on the board, I might be a staff person, I might be the founder, I might be a volunteer there, I might get services from there, et cetera. That's a third kind of relationship. So there's person to person relationships, organization to organization relationships, and then person to organization relationships. So people would say, I want to do both, and I'm going to do them both. And, you know, so there was a lot of sort of messy fussing around for a while. And then finally we made it so that you can connect up two separate projects in some app, a person project and an organization project, and have that two different surveys, and also have that third person to organization question type. So that rolled out almost, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And so for this map, we've used that functionality to begin to both use it as a community building tool, but also as just to show off the functionality. And so in our instance, the organizations that we're mapping there are two kinds, one of which is external networks that really aren't they're not part of our social system mapping community of practice, but there's so many people in our community that are part of those networks that it's useful for us to note that. So like the Six Conversations network, the Now What network, the oh no, that's an internal one, sorry. The HSD, the June Holly's network weaving, there's a couple other external networks, and then we have internal networks. And so the external networks are in this 5, what's that, pentagon, whatever that shape is. And the internal networks are these more almost circular. So there's external networks, and then there's internal teams. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to be able to visualize the people in the network and their relationships, and also visualize the actual initiatives and teams and endeavors that are in the network. So that, for instance, if you are a brand new person and you come and you say, oh, this community is I'm curious, I'm interested. You look at the map, then you can see who's working on which initiative. So you can see that, for instance, these people have all taken part in or supported in some way the Six Conversations initiative that Ben initiated. One thing I didn't say to you in the connections view, the last view I'm going to show you here, is you can also click on a connection. Any line is clickable, and if you click on the line, then you can see more information. You can see the information that they gave about that relationship. So I'm going to back up here. Let's click on Laura. I'm going to zoom. I'm going to focus just on Laura and her first degree connections, and then I'm going to focus on Jim's relationship, Jim, who's with us, to Laura. And in that set of connection questions, we asked a bunch of questions about this relationship, Jim's relationship to Laura. So they collaborate. Why he gave more information about that relationship, contexts where they where this relationship exists. So Zoom calls, social media, and then how much they contribute to his development as a social system mapper and increases his confidence and allows him to move ahead, et cetera. So you can see that about each person. I mean, every single line on the map has at least one of those questions answered, some degree of connectivity, and often more questions than that. So you can ask questions you can ask connection questions that are really not just how well do you know this person, but that are really trying to dig into what is this relationship giving to each member of it, and what is this relationship doing in the context of the broader community. You can ask along both of those lines and start to get a really rich, far deeper understanding of what's going on in the community, and and how people fit into the community in ways that might give you information that would prompt you to want to like help or reach out or intervene in some way. Okay, so that was just connections at all. And then in this context, we asked in regards to the group connections, the person, so this is a relationship from a person to a group or an initiative. And so Ben is as engaged and influential here as anyone, if not more so. He says forming this was his idea. So he's the source of this team and something he loves about it. So we have these kinds of connections from initiative to initiative. Sometimes initiatives are very closely entwined and sometimes they have nothing to do with each other. And then connections of the people to the initiatives. And so that's this view. Now, we have not really been promoting this view. We have not really updated it. This is a new view. We made it maybe 3 months ago. And we added the group element piece to the dual element piece to the map just a couple months ago. And so you can see like these people are generally the most core people in the network because they're the only ones who've answered it yet. And probably most other people don't even know it's there. So now we're have to work on how do we engage people so that they will update this, which is that question that came up early on. This one is not, I'm not sure what that's just the groups without the people. And that's that. I'm going to show you one last view and then I'm going to stop talking. This is not our map. This is a map that when we got started, we worked for this foundation that had an annual event of 1,250 people. And so we would do this, what I used to call monster maps. We made a different one every year for this organization. And so each of these little teeny tiny orange dots is a person. And then obviously the blue lines are the connections. So you can get quite big with this. And the thing that I wanted to show you that's kind of fun is in this view, we asked people we had a list of issues and we asked them what 2 issues they were focused on. And this particular map is for a conference and it's not like an ongoing network weaving thing. And so there's, they didn't have the offers and asks skill sets, et cetera, but we had these top 2 issues. And we did this view, where'd it go? Here, I just like this view because it looks so organic and fun. The teal rectangles are the issues and the orange dots are the people connected to the issues. And so you could actually sort of go through and say, find the 2 issues that you're most interested in. So let's say nonprofits and philanthropy is one of my issues. And then, which I've just selected. And I have too many views. I'm going to close because this much data bogs down one's browser. So I'm just going to pick 2 randomly: civic engagement and philanthropy. Oops, I have to hold down my shift key to select both. And then I can focus on those 2, and it's going really slowly. But it will give me the overlap of the people who are interested in both of those issues. So I can then, so these people are just interested in this issue. These people are just interested in that issue. But this clump right here is interested in both. And I can copy them, or I can highlight them, filter it out, and then download them to have a list of people who are interested in whatever combination of issues you want to do. So that's kind of fun. I've been talking about this recently with someone else and I hadn't looked at it for a while. So I thought I would pull it up and take a peek and show it to you. So, okay, I'm done yapping. Sorry, I feel like I talked a lot. Questions, comments, thoughts? That was a lot.
I think, let me see if I'm, yeah. Related to Michelle's question is also a culture of generosity, that there are people in the network who really want to help and support others. And it's also part of the values are building trust so that you aren't embarrassed to ask someone for help. So I just want to bring the cultural aspect to that question.
Thank you. That's the thing I tend to leave out, and Mary tends to remind me to is the culture. The whole thing depends on the culture. I mean, like if you're not building a culture that for which this is meaningful because there are underlying transformational components of it, it's not going to be the map isn't going to be very meaningful. And I tend to focus on the technology because that's my job, but the culture piece is the whole key underlying piece. Without it, there's no point in mapping, if you ask me.
And then Christine, you use the term closing triangles, which do you want to say something more about that or what it is?
How about somebody who knows says that?
So closing triangles is if I know two people who, I'm not sure I can explain this, who really have resources that would help each other or one, it's obvious that one person who is needing something, I know another person who could help with that, of introducing those two people, and it's called closing triangles, a term that comes from June Hawley and network weaving. So that's part of, I think, something that's related to helping people. You know, sometimes it isn't, the work isn't just creating new initiatives. Sometimes there are people really ready to go and they just need a connection with a person in a very specific resource that's needed, or experience or expertise. And when you introduce those two people, action can really happen very quickly without much effort on my part. I've seen where just connecting two people, all the ripples from just the 5 minutes it took me to connect those people.
Jim.
Just to build on that, in any complex adaptive system, if the connections are sufficient, if the interdependence between the connections, as Mary was talking about in an activity, if the difference between us is significant enough so that there's an adaptive thing that happens between the people when they connect, or they're being moved by each other. If those are all sufficient, then you get to this point where emergent things start to happen. And by doing those, connecting those triangles, increasing the density of connections, you're sort of heating up the mix. And so stuff starts to happen. And the maps allow you to see who are the, likely candidates that should be connected if you're actively weaving. Or if you're an individual in the map looking at it, you can reach out and go like, I need to be connected if I'm connected here. So you can do your own connection, or you can be woven by someone who has that role. But it starts to change the way a group feels together as you start heating up the mix.
And so just as in our own context, because my theory is that we won't be great mappers if we don't, that's too strong a way of saying it, but we will increase our good mapperness and our transformational carriers of transformationalness if we try to live by all of the theories that and interact with each other by the theories that inform our practice. And so for those of you who are present for whom this is new, we all, there's a handful of us who are here who are pretty experienced. Let's raise our hands. Mr. B. We welcome questions. We actually like to be reached out to. So you can find us on our map, or if there's someone that this is part of our culture, is to be generative and to be helpful to people who are curious and interested. And even if you aren't gonna, jump in and be our best friend for the next 10 years, we still may be able to be supportive in some way. So that's an invitation. And that's part of the culture we are purposefully trying to generate. And there's Jim putting his email in there, and I think everybody knows how to find me. I think we have one more minute before we do our jump off thing. And I was hoping that someone had a question who's not a regular, or a comment or a concern. Michelle, I'm seeing you.
I just really appreciate the conversation and the introduction. It brings a lot of questions for me. So I'm like, oh my God, we don't have a whole other hour to work through my questions. So it's really great. I mean, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind to me is I'm working with a group of people who are not a group of people at all. They are not a network. They are connected by circumstances. And so I'd be really curious to see like, the question of engagement is a very big question to me when people are already part of a lot of other different networks. So why would this be, this is a small bit of what people do, which might be very important to them, but not something that I'm sure people are really wanting to build community around now, even if it's something that'd be really valuable to them. So a lot is coming up for me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a relevant question in our context as well. And it's an important question for us to grapple with. And so you're invited, if you do have an extra half hour, please feel free to stick around and ask more questions. And if you, I'm gonna just have us do so we have a goodbye ritual. So if you need to jump off now at the top of the hour, we have a goodbye ritual, which is that we all unmute if you're willing to participate, which there's no pressure to, but if you want to participate, go ahead and unmute yourself. I will count down from 3 to 2 to 1, and then we just all send each other off with blessings and our release and blessings for the day. So go ahead and unmute, and I'm gonna 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Love you all.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.